Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So we have another guest podcast today with a special guest of ours. He is a neuroscientist, so he's got a background in physics, but now works in biology. He's a neuroscientist at Rockefeller University specifically. And yeah, our gentleman here is named Mason Hargrave. Woo! Almost messed your name up.
Yeah, I'm going to insert clapping as we do to all our guests. So welcome Mason. It's good to have you. Yeah.
Thank you, claps.
There you go. I didn't know you had a background in theater as well. What a performance. That's really good.
Funny guy.
No, only a little bit. I played my chief role. I peaked in high school. I played Nicely Johnson in our production of Guys and Dolls, and that was quite the fun show.
Sweet.
You were braver than I, man. I exited out of theater production in middle school.
I still can't believe you were in theater. It's so weird.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised how many science people are also. There's crossover there.
That's true. We all did have normal lives. Well, some of us had normal lives before.
Yeah, because Terrence, I mean, just for the record, I didn't know Terrence was a band kind of nerd kind of guy.
Don't ever. So this is a major infraction. Don't ever call a classical nerd a band nerd.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm a classical nerd. Don't ever call me a band nerd. That's a violation.
That's notable. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Were you getting? See, that's one of the nice things about the Rockefeller University is we have this like orchestral dome.
Yeah.
That is. I mean, it's all Rockefeller money. It's kind of ridiculous sometimes, and I think one of the Rockefellers decided that since they had the property here, they would just like put an orchestra dome on top. It's where we do all of our talks, but it's like this very notable like dome in the middle of campus or at the edge of campus.
I bet it's so cool though.
So you can do.
If you guys are ever in New York, if you're ever in New York, you like classical music, then as things open up here, hopefully over the next year, we'll get you into an orchestra performance. I get.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah,
I'm so into that.
Yeah, he'd have anime. He'd have those anime glowing eyes. I swear, he would. But anyway, Mason, like, there's so many questions that we want to ask.
Yeah, so just to preface it, of course, for people who may not be familiar with our channel, maybe coming from Mason's stuff, we are physicists. Well, physics guys will say, because technically we're not, physicists with PhDs.
Yeah.
So, we have background in, we have bachelor's degrees in physics. One is a master's. So we wanted to just try to keep this friendly for the physics audience as well. Although Mason, we know you do have a physics background, which helps a lot, I'm sure.
Yep, that is also my bachelor's.
Right. So we're all in the same boat in many ways here, except you have that neuroscience specialty going on here. So hopefully we can try to keep it in a language of physics, and then also a language of layman.
Yep.
So cool, man. So we wanted to talk today about, I guess, the origins of life. It's one of these giant questions, right? I think of like the monkeys from 2001 Space Odyssey, all, with the bone in hand around the monolith.
I mean, there is a little bit of that.
Yeah.
That's just not the origin story. That's the that's past complexification.
True. That's actually a little bit way laid down the line, right?
Yeah. That might be the origins of religion or something.
Yeah. So maybe my first thoughts are not so good, but one thing I had a question about, Mason, specifically was the whole concept of abiogenesis. So I wonder if you can illuminate for us, like, what is abiogenesis? Is that like a particular type of explanation for the origins of life? Like, what's going on there? Just give us some insight.
So abiogenesis, this isn't a word I typically use. So I forgive me if I'm going to get this wrong, and other people use this in a different way. But when I hear abiogenesis, it suggests to me that it's the process of creating a biological being from inert materials. Like, how do you get from the inert materials no one would call living to the point where you have like a living cell that's replicating itself and being biological? And there's a lot of thoughts about that. And in fact, kind of in between my time as doing astrophysics and a little bit of quantum materials later on, or like kind of interlaced with this, in my current neuroscience career, I had this career that's kind of extending into the current time with some collaborations I have at University of New South Wales, about how exactly it is that you get from these sorts of chemicals, inert chemicals, all the way over to biological matter. And there's kind of a story there, and there's a couple competing stories there, and there's a couple theories that may be useful to talk about. In order, those are the Rna World Hypothesis, the Ocean Origins Hypothesis, and the Hot Springs Hypothesis. And I think you'll see when I lay those out that there is an obvious conflict, or potentially obvious conflict, between two of those theories, and they are in fact the two most popular theories, and most people who believe in them believe in both of them. So I think that there's a very interesting rift starting to occur within the origins of life community that I'd be happy to talk about.
Right.
Interesting. So you're saying there's a incompatibility between two predominant, what would you say, frameworks or models even?
Two predominantly and concurrently held frameworks and theories.
Very interesting.
So most people who believe in one of these believes in the other. Most people who believe in the Rna World Hypothesis also believe in the Ocean Origins Hypothesis.
Very interesting, man.
Wait, I'm not familiar. So for those that aren't familiar with this too, can you give us like a little rundown?
Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping you would ask.
Yeah.
So the Rna World Hypothesis states that RNA was the first. So if you're going to ask the question, how do you get from inert chemicals to life? The question is, which biomolecule showed up first? Like, which one was first to the scene? Not saying that not saying that this biomolecule showing up constitutes life. Mm-hmm. It's just asking the question, which biomolecule was probably the precursor to the generation of the other ones? Because in your body, you have all sorts of different sorts of macromolecules. You have RNA, that's a potential candidate. You have DNA, that's another potential candidate. You have, you have proteins. You have lipid membranes. You have, like different types of hormones and neurotransmitters, which are typically some sort of protein or small nucleotide. You have all these different macromolecules that are available that could be the first biological molecule. But the one that we all believe is the first biological molecule is RNA, and that's because it has some really nice properties.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw actually a video before we did this we're doing the podcast. I was watching a guy. I don't know anything about biology, so let me preface this. I don't really know if this guy's taken seriously or not, but I have a feeling that he's got expertise, but I think he might have some holes potentially in his logic. But he's a guy named Dr. James Tour. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I don't think so.
Okay, well, I guess he's not a biologist. He's actually a synthetic chemist. But he speaks about origins of life stuff, and he's got a Christian background, so his bias is very heavy, I think, on the Christian side. But he talked about
You're saying he's trying to prove something?
I think he does the classic thing of starting with conclusion and then building to that conclusion. And in this case, it's the conclusion of.
You're worried that he might not be scientific.
In this framework. But it was interesting because it led me down a rabbit hole of finding another guy named Professor Dave Explains, who kind of went through a bunch of stuff, debunking kind of this guy's stuff. But the guy James Tour said that basically there were 4 building blocks of life, as you said, and he said there were sugars, proteins, RNA, and then lipids.
Yep.
But it was interesting because I think he was saying that we could not synthesize them. Is that true?
Yeah. So, okay. So, yeah, let's get into that. So, okay. First, what are the building blocks? So if those are the building blocks of life, what are the building blocks of the building blocks? Mm-hmm. So because you can't just get straight to macromolecules. That's right. So, and those are all called macromolecules, just, basically meaning just big molecules. And big relative to not being like, anyway, big relative.
Yeah.
So
relative to an assortment of just elements.
Right. Precisely.
Yeah.
And so you have, and like relative to water, for instance, relative to water, these are much bigger structures than just like water.
Right.
So you have these interplanetary particulates falling into Earth, right? And in these particulates are nucleotides and ribose. Ribose is the sugar, or the sugars. That's ose. Anything that ends in ose is likely a sugar. Glucose, sucrose, and ribose, sugar.
Right.
And then nucleotides, which are these little kind of nitrogenous bases that come off of the off the backbone of ribose that is RNA. But these things are separated, but they all exist, and also so do lipids. They all come in these types of asteroids called carboniferous chondrite asteroids. And this other interplanetary particulate dust. So you have available to you the sort of complex carbon-based molecules that just seem to, and we don't know how this happens, but seems, and this is a question of a lot of current research on how asteroids work. Note that we've never captured an asteroid, right? We've only gotten out there, we've only gotten meteorites once they fall underground. So there's all sorts of physics about trying to figure out. But Dr. Peter Janinskins at the SETI Institute is a guy who I've talked to about this a number of times, who it really tries to work out, some of the, figure out what we can learn about asteroids from meteorites, but he emphasizes that they are very different things. Right. And we also can get some interplanetary particulates, but you can test this stuff from old meteorites or these interplanetary particulates, and you can find the building blocks of the building blocks, the things that you would need to put together in order to get RNA and lipids, like proper lipid membranes and all these different things. So the fact of the matter is that we know where the building blocks of the building blocks should have come from. And it seems reasonable that these things would get together and form in the way that they did. The specific pathways that those building blocks came together to create those building blocks is an open question in origins of life geochemistry. And a lot of people are working on those. That's one of the big questions.
Right. So there's many different pathways at the current state, but is there a particular one, or could we have come from those many pathways as well?
In fact, the statement is, I wouldn't say that there's many different pathways. I think the statement is that we don't know which pathways there are. I mean, it's even before that. It's like, okay, you have a bunch of building blocks, and then you see later in time that there's this erected structure made of those building blocks, and you ask, okay, well, how did that get assembled? And the answer is you don't know, but it's at least nice to know that the building blocks were there, right?
Right. Yeah.
That they existed. So it's not crazy. Like, these aren't foreign, ridiculous, molecules to find. The initial molecules to build the macromolecules exist. They're there.
Right.
Is this an argument more of like, are these, these macromolecules that we're seeing as fundamental building blocks of life, is it more like we're trying to figure out how the spontaneity comes to, or the conditions that come to occur to create these macromolecules in?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a big question. And the answer is, frankly, I think we don't know.
So that sounds like
I think
chemistry.
there are a lot of theories, but
would that be chemistry, Mason, or?
That would be geochemistry. These are the people who work on this are all geochemists. They're people who think about, okay, well, what different types of chemical systems can exist on an early Earth, and then how would those chemical systems create chemical pathways to generate, this catalyzes this reaction, and that reaction is caused by the this change in pH or whatever it is. I mean, these people are wizards, coming out with a pathway that actually generates that. And you can imagine a lot of hypothetical pathways for how to synthesize these things. And I don't actually know. This is not that step of things is not my specific area of expertise. I come in where you assume that the macromolecules exist. So you assume that the building blocks of the building blocks have been formed into the building blocks, and now you just have the building blocks, and then how do you get life? So I slot in at that stage.
Gotcha.
Interesting. So then I guess that leads me to ask another question, Mason, is that since your background is actually a neuroscientist, why are you concerned at all with the origins of life?
I got into this question back when I was in undergraduate, and me and my buddy Max Friedman watched a Joe Rogan episode with this guy who I love and adore named Bruce Damer, who I didn't know about at the time, who was talking about asteroid mining, and I'd been blabbing my big mouth in undergrad about being interested in creating an asteroid mining company someday as I get older, which is that's my billionaire pipe dream, right? So if I ever became Jeff Bezos, or Jeff Bezos' Blue Origins, and Elon Musk, of course, has SpaceX. So if I ever become a billionaire, my harebrained scheme will be to wrangle some asteroids. And so I was talking about that to my buddy, and he says, "Well, this guy Bruce has some ideas as to how to do that. He's an adjunct professor here at UC Santa Cruz, so he shoots an email." And I say, so he, me, and my buddy Pavle Jeremic all get basically brought. He says, "Yeah, I expect us come by my office hours." And he says, "No, come up to my place." So we take this long winding path through the redwoods, all the way up to Boulder Creek, where we go up to his house and his ranch. And I mean, this guy's like some sort of wizard, it feels like. Also, I'm saying wizard twice now, but this guy is so goofy. Yeah. I love him. His whole house is like perfect Santa Cruz hippie house. He has this double-decker rusty bus that's sitting there that's from the old Grateful Dead glory days, and some sort of Merry Pranksters type bus, and he has I don't think it was who was it? I think it was anyway, I think it was Terence McKenna's driver's license and a whole set of these things out there. And he has this whole computer, the thing he calls the Digibarn, which has tons of old, he has the first personal computer at the Digibarn. It's the Link. This guy was involved in creating graphics user interfaces back in the day. He was one of the people who invented GUIs. Whoa. And just like this crazy awesome dude who just invited us over to his house, and we, over some Trader Joe's snacks and sitting on some cushions, because he didn't have chairs in one of the rooms, sitting on cushions in front of some Japanese style table, we all discuss he brings out this little carboniferous chondrite asteroid, and he says, "You should smell this." And we say,
"Was it
okay,
drugs, Mason?"
And we've never met this guy before. He's this professor who lives in the forest, and we smell the rocks, and they smell very earthy. And he says, "These are, this is kind of this is where life comes from." And we say, "Okay, well, we were here to talk about asteroid mining," but he seemed really that day intent on talking about the origins of life. And when you're an undergraduate, I think one of the tricks to doing well in undergrad is just to not fight the current. Not fight the flow. If some professor's really excited to talk to you about something that they're into, just get interested, because they're not interested because they're crazy. They're interested because there's something interesting there. So be open to switching lanes as the punches come in.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people make the mistake, by the way, just in general, of being too rigid. I want to study this thing. It's no. Study what interesting people around you who will take you under their wing are interested in. So Bruce Damer really took me under his wing. He introduced me to his colleague David Deamer, who invented the nanopore sequencer, and they had collaboratively come up with this theory for the hot springs origins hypothesis. And I just had an opportunity, and I said, "Hey, I think you could probably mathematically model some of this." My naive self at 19 years old, thinking, well, I could probably do some of this.
Yeah.
And I opened my big mouth, and they got excited, and they said, "Cool, we have a guy to do math modeling." And I said, I just pretended I knew what I was doing. Yeah, I could do some math models. And, we actually came up with, I've since published 2 papers on mathematical models for RNA synthesis.
Wow.
One with David Deamer and one independently. So
is this the paper that you sent me, Mason?
Yeah, that would be what a polyedition, something like. I can't even remember the name of my own paper.
title.
So they always make you have such weird titles. A polyedition model for the synthesis of linear polymers and other RNA-like molecules. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, the thing that I found striking about the paper, I immediately noticed when I was looking through it, that you had a lot of thermodynamics in there.
Oh yeah,
like, shit, this guy's using
thermo paper.
Yeah, I was like, wow. So it just made me realize that how much thermo is probably involved with this kind of origins of life stuff, and especially when you're talking about underwater hot springs. I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. It's like, you care to illuminate how thermo plays in? Did you actually first one? Are you going to say something?
Yeah. I was gonna say we had this me and Terence had a separate conversation about the origins of life like last week.
I don't remember now.
And it was more about how thermodynamics almost have like a play in this, because thermodynamics is kind of like information exchange, right? Energy is information in some way.
Okay.
And the assortment of like systems where it's favorable to produce life, I would imagine there's obviously a cost, right? To bond these things together and make macromolecules.
Right, because we know things like just from like nuclear fusion, let's say.
Yeah.
Although this isn't fusion, but we know bonding molecules cost more energy than releasing. But then again, I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
So but, I mean, everything has a cost if you want to build something energetically.
But let's see. What is Mason? Could you
that's exactly right. You have to spend to get information set up and replicated. You have to spend more energy than you get out, than you store out of that process, right? Like that's the essential kind of Maxwell's demon idea, which is that the information compute costs as much or more than what you get out of that information when Maxwell's demon sits at that empty opening between two chambers. Is that something that I can assume as baseline knowledge for the audience?
I think so.
Yeah, let's.
Let's do
it.
Yeah.
Without getting too in the weeds.
Cater too much to the layman all the time. We're trying to strike a balance a little bit, especially since you're a professional in the field. We'll keep it a little bit more high level than usual, and that's fine.
Yeah,
fair enough. So that's the story. And by the way, if anyone wants to see an explanation of Maxwell's demon, check out my podcast. I have my first episode with Marcelo Magnasco. He's a professor here of biophysics, and he explained it all very, very precisely. So
what's your podcast called again, Mason?
That is called Solutions.
And it's on YouTube. Where are we at?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, the whole 9 yards.
Sweet.
It's all the places.
Support your boy.
Check it out.
Yeah.
And this cost. So thermodynamics is super involved here, because you're basically asking the question: Have you spent enough entropy to make up for the entropy you're trying to revert? You're kind of seeming to reverse in building up the complexity of these organisms. Like, are you dissipating enough energy to justify your existence?
Exactly.
From a physical standpoint.
Exactly.
And that's the tricky game. That's the whole tricky game of all of this. And that's why I would say what we wrote, me and my collaborator Alex Spaeth, is essentially, I don't think I'm saying too much when I say this, it's the foundational thermodynamics paper for linear polymers that I don't think anyone has as explicitly laid out the connections between three different things here, which are the Gibbs free energy of bond formation in the context of this system. I'm not saying we're the first people to figure out these relationships in general. I'm saying in the specific context of linear polyedition polymers. That's like a very specific subset, which are like RNA. So we call them RNA-like polymers, which are the Gibbs free energy of bond formation, the chemical rates of bonding and unbonding, and the chemical rates of bonding and unbonding. And of course, when I'm going to say a list, I'm going to brain fart on the last one, and the probability of bond formation. So there's a probabilistic way of looking at it. There's which is the kind of probability theory way of looking. There's a reaction rate way of looking at this, and there's a Gibbs free energetic way of looking at this, the Gibbs free energy way of looking at this. And these are all related in this context by equations that we lay out in this paper. And that's what we're doing, is we're relating the statistical, the dynamic, and the energetic perspectives for the same system. And we created equations that connect all three of those very precisely, very specifically for these systems. And that allows chemists to go in and actually use something like a actual distribution of how long the polymers are in solution to make and that distribution, by the way, will have a very specific shape, which has been known for a long time, but the exact dynamics on the way to getting there has never been made clear before. That it will approach all kind of, with all initial conditions, it should approach this geometric distribution where the shorter polymers are significantly more likely than longer polymers. And that's in any system where you don't have any extra tricks at play. So if you just put a bunch of these, little RNA monomers together, they link together to form a chain. And so we're interested in the rates at which those links to form a chain come together and break apart, because you need RNA to be of a specific length in order to get the properties that makes them nice. So I should actually probably clarify this. So let me jump way back to the beginning here and kind of lay this out in a way that I think chronologically makes sense.
All right. Sure. Yeah.
Great. Why do we like RNA as the first macromolecule? That's the first question to ask. The answer to that question is that RNA can do both things. It can store information, and that has that relation to the energetic side that we were talking about earlier. And it can perform functions. What do I mean when I say that it can perform functions? I mean that proteins are normally useful because they can do things like catalyze reactions. So a protein comes in and it can reduce the activation energy of a specific bond that wants to form, or a bond that should be broken. Or not should be, but putting together and breaking apart molecules.
Right.
So catalysts, catalysis is an example of performing a function. Other things do other proteins do different things. They're functional in the sense that they're a pore, so they allow certain things in and they allow certain things in and out. But these are all functions. These are the functions of, like, why do the macromolecule exist? It's to do this thing. They're a tool for a purpose.
Right.
RNA can also perform functions. In fact, there's a whole class of RNA molecules called ribozymes, and ribozymes are enzymes made out of RNA. So you have a really nice confluence of things. DNA doesn't perform functions. There's almost no functional DNA that has been known, but there is functional RNA. So RNA can perform functions and it can store information. Those are the two things that make it the most likely candidate for the beginning. DNA can only do one of those things, and proteins can only do the other.
Interesting. So DNA is the prevalent one though now, right?
Yeah. DNA won out. DNA won out probably for stability, but RNA is still there, right? So the central dogma of biology, this is one thing that you should know no matter what field you're in, is that DNA gets transcribed into RNA, which then goes to the ribosome to get turned into proteins. And that's the whole step. You have DNA to RNA to ribosome to proteins. So the RNA goes to the ribosome to get turned into proteins. It's like the blueprints for how to make a protein. And that's the thing, is that proteins seem as if they're only constructed through this very complicated thing called the ribosome. So often the origins of life story question kind of boils down to, how do you get to the ribosome?
Yeah.
That's the really tricky question, I think, and I don't think we're close to that. Maybe we're closer than I know. Maybe I just don't know the right people, and I haven't read the right literature. But
right.
That's always a possibility.
Yeah.
So I actually have another interesting question. Hopefully, I want to try to make it a little bit more simple. I was just watching a Kurzgesagt video the other day on the origins of life, and one thing that struck me that I feel kind of dumb that I never even knew until like this year was the fact that if we really imagine back 4 billion years ago to the first cells, right? It started like one of the first prokaryote cells was just kind of this I guess you would say it's just this I don't even know what you would say. It's like a gel that only consisted of sugars maybe, or polysaccharides. You'll correct me on this, Mason, but then somehow it got its constituents like mitochondria by accident in some sense. Like it was a cell trying to eat a mitochondria, and they have this symbiotic relationship now. So
yeah, that's the idea that the archaea ate a protist, I think.
Right, like how does that propagate throughout the rest of all cells? Like I don't really understand how a cell trying to eat another constituent of a cell became a part of it now.
I think it's another energetic cost of sorts. It's like, I would say.
Here we go. Here's my answer. One thing that's smaller than another thing lives inside this thing, right? It has this really so let's say you have one big blob and one small blob, and the big blob is really good at one thing. It's really good at collecting something like glucose, some sort of energy source. The second thing is really good at turning that glucose into the energy that's relevant to the cell, which is ATP, adenylyl triphosphate. Because what your body often does is it takes an adenosine triphosphate and it breaks up the phosphate bond. So it's a triphosphate, it becomes a diphosphate. So it goes from ATP to ADP. And that energy that you get from breaking the bond is thermodynamically what allows everything to run, right? That's so it takes glucose, it goes through the whole glycolysis cycle to create ATP, then it gets turned to ADP, and the bond breaking of that bond is the energy release. So you have one guy who's really good at collecting the glucose, but not as efficient at converting it to ATP. You have another guy, let's say, and this is I'm just putting out a model. I'm not saying that this is how it happened, but this is how I would imagine it would happen. So this is views are my own.
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer. And another guy who is really good, another small blob that's really good at turning glucose into ATP when it gets it. Well, if it gets somehow embedded into the other guy, then that's really useful for both of them, because one of them is like, oh wow, you're giving me all this free glucose. I could totally use all of this. This is great because I can turn this into ATP as fast as you can give it to me. And the other guy's like, awesome, I have this thing inside of me that's now producing ATP at a much faster rate. So when I consume glucose, now I've just jacked up the speed of my ATP production. And so you could imagine that you have this situation where it's just like a symbiotic relationship where it's like, I'm going to live inside of you because when you do your thing, I get all the positive externalities of you. So you'd want to live inside the ATP producing guy, the mitochondria, that's where it's all done, would want to live inside of the glucose vacuum, the guy who's able to pick up as much glucose as possible. So I suspect that that's how that happened. Is that why would they even want to leave? They wouldn't. It's not like they got eaten. It's like it made sense for both of them for one of them to be inside the other.
But then the question is like, how does that become a one unit? Because like, let's say when they're dividing or when they're replicating, like how do they work in unison like that? So I think cells undergo mitosis. I forget if it's mitosis or meiosis.
Yeah.
You have to correct me. How's it that there's...
They do both.
How does it that they stay as a singular unit?
Meiosis is for creating gametes, so that's for creating sperm and eggs.
Okay.
And mitosis is for... You get mitosis is two. So...
Okay.
Diploid. Yeah, it's just, it makes... anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so then how are they now one unit? Like... How do they know both to divide at the same time? Like, I don't really understand the...
Slowly. Over time. Very slowly, and a bunch of changes that we won't ever exactly get. But the idea being something like, for a while, they just kept finding each other. And the ones that were they kept fighting each other, and this happened over. It wasn't like a single event necessarily. It's like this happened over and over, and they kept finding each other and kept finding each other. And eventually, the ones that found them earlier had some sort of advantage. They got bigger. They had and then you could imagine that. I mean, but these are all just me imagining things, right? This is all abstract theory. And every time that so the ones who get it earlier and earlier and earlier, and then finally one of them developed the mutation that let their offspring where they were able to synchronize division time. So the mitochondria synchronize its division time with the cell itself, right? They synced up. They had some chemical signal to each other to say, hey, I'm dividing, you should divide now too. and then that would happen. And that means, and then probabilistically, half the time you would end up with you and your offspring having a mitochondria, and the other half of the time, one of you would get both.
Right.
All right. Okay. That's still better than if you guys don't sync up your division time.
Exactly.
So that's an improvement in fitness right there. Yeah. And then you develop some pathway that's like, well, it's actually better if both of us get one. And so then you come up with some system, probably using pre-existing things like spindle fibers to, or I'm not actually sure exactly how this works, but to pull the mitochondria into either side. So you can imagine this slow incremental process of, okay, earlier and earlier and earlier capture of the mitochondria like ancestor is better for you than how do I capture it as early as possible? You synchronize division times, and then how do you get from that to an equal set? You modify the structure of your internal cell skeleton in some way that they actually structurally get pulled apart during that division. So you can imagine kind of a stepping up in complexity, and that's the way to think about it. Is it has to be, it's kind of a gradient descent type process.
Right. I see that makes so much sense.
Yeah, I have a sort of narrative that I play in my head because for those of you that, I guess the listeners that do know, I have a background in biology a little bit. That was my first love, I guess, in science, and then switching to physics. But, the origins of life were, 4 billion years ago, here on Earth at least. And it took another billion years to start getting multicellular life, I think.
And this was likely a precursor to that. Like this was a necessary pre-step.
So
you don't think it could have
getting the mitochondria involved in the game was a necessary pre-step?
Right, exactly. So this narrative of it took maybe a billion years to go through these iterations of life being, syncing up and then maybe getting to the stage where we have the most successful multicellular organisms building life. And I mean, in biolabs, I'm sure you know this, Mason, but in biolabs they show these famous experiments where they give you, I guess they show you exponential law, how
petri dish with the bacteria in there,
how easy it is to replicate. And that's kind of the idea that once this one successful thing replicates, it just multiplies,
takes over the petri dish.
Right.
So
right, and that's exactly it. Like the thing is that this particular thing happening probably took something like a quarter of evolutionary history.
Right.
Right. We're trying to figure this out.
How could it possibly happen? It's lots of compute time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. A billion years of compute time iterating over and over and over and over
in parallel.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Something's bound to work at some point.
Now, a billion years in parallel.
Yeah.
And it's like people. This is something that I find really funny. Is that computer scientists are often like, "Oh yeah, man, we really want to use evolutionary algorithms because nature is probably just the most perfect, sophisticated." I'm like, no. Nature sucks. Nature has to run things nature's only good because it can run things in parallel.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing nature can do really well. Is it runs in parallel really well.
Right.
What it's really bad at is coming up with a clever, path to the solution. It just bangs rocks together randomly until it gets. It's like about bozo sort.
No. Is that a troll
you want to talk
sorting
about
algorithm?
Sorting algorithms for cars, and the naive one is insertion sort, and everyone will tell you about insertion sort, where you take a card and you try to figure out. You say, okay, what card is this? And you put it, and you take another card, and does it go before or after? And you do that. That you think, oh well, that's the least efficient algorithm you can imagine to solve that problem. That's what any 5-year-old would tell you to do, right?
Yeah.
A 5-year-old would do it that way.
Yeah.
But nature does something called bozo sort, where it takes the pack of cards, it throws it in the air, it reassembles it, sees if it's sorted, and if it's not, it throws it in the air again.
And repeat that
it's
forever.
Worse than the least efficient thing you could imagine.
Yeah.
And the only reason it works is because it runs in parallel.
Oh yeah.
Right. That's such a good analogy.
Yeah.
I guess one other question I had that was on my mind was I was wondering how far along are we actually in synthesizing life ourselves? Are we anywhere close, or are we just so far away it's just not even conceivable? Where are we at?
I won't answer this, but I'm going to tell you who you should talk to if you want this answered well, because this is far out of my purview. Find someone out of the George Church Lab, email some of the grad students there, some of the postdocs, and see if you can get one of them on the podcast. If you can get George Church on, but that guy's difficult to get a hold of. But I bet you could get a George Church grad student or postdoc on the podcast.
Okay, good looking out. We will put that in the mental.
That's the name.
George Church.
Look at it. George Church.
Were you gonna say something, Juan?
No, I was gonna clarify on your question.
Oh,
because your question.
What's wrong with my question?
No, just like because humans are trying to create digital sort of recreations of life, right? Or at least intelligence.
Sure, like we've got the cellular automata. What that Wolfram does, and then other guys like what's the guy who just died from COVID?
I don't know.
Conway. Yeah.
Sure. And then, but also I'm saying like AI and stuff. We're trying to digitally sort of make replicas of like what's supposed to be something that's lifelike.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? As opposed to, I guess we don't understand maybe.
And that's the issue, is that like we're not. This is exactly my point. Is that if we're going to do an evolutionary kind of emergent type of way of doing it, we have to beat the parallelism that is nature. Like nature is parallel. Like what's happening here is parallel to what's happening there, and we're all the way across the country or whatever. Right. So it's like nature is the most incredible parallel processing machine, and we have to beat that somehow if we're going to figure that out. I mean, I would say that in silico, I can comment that we're not even close. It can take like a week or so to compute like less than a millisecond of a protein jiggling.
Yeah.
Right. Our time scales are so far off of each other that like we're talking about heat death of the universe type differences. You can't compute something more complicated on something less complicated without extra time. So that gap, that delta between complexity between an organism and a GPU is massive, and that delta is proportional in some way to the amount to the delta in time. So does that make sense? So you sacrifice complexity for longer compute times, and you also sacrifice complexity for more generality. So the number, like my cells in my body can only simulate one thing. It's like me. It's not simulating. It is me. It can be one thing. It's me.
Yeah.
It can't
be. Some people might argue that it's not a simulation, but.
Well,
I'm sorry, I derailed you there.
The only way simulation theory makes sense is that base reality is significantly more complicated than ours, and then we're like a very simplified version of the real situation, which maybe
Could be. Who knows?
That's the way you could go.
Take the red pill, Mason.
But you're not going to wake up out of the simulation and then it be the same as here. It's going to be. It's going to be not even physically the same. Like what I'm trying to say is that the physics would be more complicated.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You might just have a heart attack by the sheer overload of information if you woke up out of that matrix.
Right. Like it might be a 10-dimensional like physical world, and you're like actually been used to 3 dimensions your whole life, and this is like you're dealing a trivially small subset of the whole manifold of the things that someone has figured out. Like. Anyway, I don't want to.
That's what happens when you take DMT.
That's right. That's right. That's what they tell. That's what Joe Rogan tells you.
Right. But anyway, I kind of wanted to also point out, Mason. I forgot that we actually know each other from the Portal podcast.
The Portal podcast.
Yeah. Yep. So our fans know I'm a big wine stan, as I say, Eric Weinstein. So me and Mason, we actually know each other from the Portal Discord. So there's a Discord server where we used to all congregate and talk amongst other intellectuals. It was really a cool place until Clubhouse fucked that up. So
sorry,
it was already
gone
down
Terence.
Before then. But
I mean, I think it died far before Clubhouse.
Yeah, you're right. I just wanted to shit on Clubhouse because.
Yeah, no. Are you guys on Clubhouse?
I don't have that poll.
I'm on Clubhouse.
Okay, dude. We'll add each other on Clubhouse.
Cool.
I wish I was, but I don't use Apple products because I'm not a plebe.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't have an iPhone, but I've been doing it off my iPad and fooling everyone. So people are adding me to iMessage chats. So like, your number doesn't work. I'm like, oh yeah, you need to use my email.
Smart.
So
yeah, I'm so disappointed in that I can't go on there. But anyway, yeah, it's cool though. We would have Eric talk there a lot of times about certain things. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. It was kind of a golden age at the beginning of COVID, where it was like at least there was some group of people to talk to. Of course, there's the portable server community that exists, and now I also have my own Discord. So if you guys want to slide into either of those, I think you could have a good time.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So some of the good characters from the last server are on these servers. So
nice.
Yeah. So now that we have like a good foundation of like, I guess, like, what is life and stuff, I'm kind of curious to ask you, what's your take on like talks of consciousness and stuff? Like, I don't know if you've delved into that,
shit.
right? Like, I'm sure you have takes
I've
on this.
had numerous consciousness conversations. I have some hot takes.
Okay.
If you'd like some steaming hot takes on consciousness,
please. Yeah,
serve those bad boys up.
We are not ready.
Rev up those fryers. Yeah, rev up those fryers, man. We're ready for them, because physicists like to get into this discussion. We have Penrose. We have Max Tegmark. There's a bunch of physicists that try to like answer the idea of or just consciousness.
I have to say, I sent a saucy email to Max Tegmark back when I was undergraduate. I sent a saucy email.
What? Care to indulge us?
Yeah, the rough outline was Max Tegmark was talking about basically the idea of substrate independence of consciousness, that consciousness could be substrate independent, that you could go from the neural compute structure to the in silico compute structure, and it would be how would you say that you could just like upload your consciousness to a computer?
It'd be like it's one to one.
It's one to one, yeah,
which is probably not real, right?
And I said in an email, I said, yeah, this substrate, I think I was too saucy. I said something like, the substrate independence of consciousness seems to me impossible, considering that if you believe consciousness to be an emergent phenomenon of underlying physical processes, then, for instance, if I have a quantum spin liquid, which is some sort of special quantum system that you can cook up, theoretically you could cook up. Actually, I don't think anyone's found a quantum spin liquid, but I was using it as an example.
Sure.
If you have some quantum spin liquid that's in some crystal structure, I can't transfer that to a different crystal structure because that crystal structure is physically different. And so there's no way to get this thing, which is the quantum spin liquid, to transfer into a different crystal structure, because that crystal structure is just not the same crystal structure. It's a different one, and it can't support a quantum spin liquid state. So it literally, you can't that's not substrate independent. This is an emergent phenomenon that is not substrate independent. It's quintessentially substrate dependent. And so I said that to him, and then I said, hey, but also I'm looking for PhD programs. Are you looking for anyone to join your lab? And he did not respond to me.
Oh, you shot your shot.
Yeah. I was like, hey, by the way, I think you're wrong about all of this, but also, do you want me in your lab? I think in my head I was like, maybe he'll respect the gusto.
Right.
Maybe he'll respect the guts.
Yeah.
But no, it didn't turn out the way I had hoped.
Yeah.
No response.
Do you think physicists should kind of have more takes on consciousness? Because
no, I think they should have way fewer
less
takes on consciousness. I think physicists should stick to what they're good at. I think physicists should stop talking about higher energy particle theories and should solve solid state physics. I think we need way less string theorists and way more people working on band theory.
Right. Yeah, let's figure out room temperature superconductivity Yeah.
But I'm so boring. My take is so boring. It's like give up.
That's
my take on particle physics is give up.
Yeah.
You guys are done.
You had your chance and you blew it. Huh?
No, you had no. That's the thing is, it's not that. Is that you had your chance and you succeeded so hard.
Oh, true.
That now you're chasing the dragon.
Yeah.
Of more particle physics. Like, dude, we did it. Like, there's no. You guys literally haven't come up. You've had 30 years, 50 years, and you guys haven't come up with a new. No. Let me just point out, I'm being super ridiculous right now. It's
legit.
Let me just say that I know that I don't understand nearly enough to know whether or not what I'm saying actually makes sense. But I'm under this impression.
Right.
I'm under the impression that we've succeeded so hard that none of this string theory makes new predictions. We just like there's not. I don't know if there's been a massively surprising breakthrough at the LHC since it became operational. And it's like, okay, well, here's the question I think we have to ask is, should we spend billions of more dollars on a bigger, badder LHC again? Should we do it again? Right. Should we get together and put, or is that money for the time being better spent solving problems that are more tractable, that have more predictions? There are novel predictions in solid state physics, like the quantum spin liquid, that have not been proven to be the case. There are anyons, there are anyons like Majorana fermions that we need to find. There are all sorts of special excitations which are just as interesting as particle physics inside of these materials. And we just have so much to do in the field of condensed matter and solid state, and it's just ignored because because basically Richard Feynman made particle physics sexy, and no one else wants to do anything other than be the new Feynman.
Exactly.
Because graduates want to start messing with Feynman diagrams.
Yeah, or no. Here's the thing. There's so many people that I see, like, I get to go work at CERN, and that's like,
right.
I'm just like, you're doing this just to look cool.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I think some of it.
True.
I think some of it is like to look cool, but I'm like,
but we all do
so
things
much
to look cool, you know?
Yeah, I guess.
I got into condensed matter because quantum computing was cool as fuck, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But
we got to go with the different cool.
But you get stuck in the
Mason's. You got a great take, man.
Yeah,
that's such a true take, because it's like, that's why I always laugh when people say like physics is finished, like we've gone as far as we go. It's like, no, we haven't.
It's like, no, you're just looking in the wrong places.
We're looking in the wrong places. It's like, I think that's a great take, man.
Yeah.
We've succeeded so hard, we're chasing the dragon in particle physics.
Some of it, like we still look. If I could get all the physicists together and be like, you know what, we actually want. We don't want a Large Hadron Collider. Can we reinstate the? I think I can't remember which national lab it was that had a functional molten salt reactor.
Oh, it's Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
Oak Ridge.
Yeah.
We had a functional molten salt reactor and we decommissioned it.
Yep. I know.
Big energy,
What?
bro.
I know. Big energy.
Big oil, dude.
Yep. And then China's taking up the slack now, so
We're gonna die because physicists won't stop getting together about particle reactors and decide that, you know what would be really cool is if we could get another. Can we just get? It would be cheaper. It would be cheaper if we were like, you know what? Skip making us more particle accelerators.
Yeah.
Let's get us some molten salt reactors,
please,
and let's figure out how to make non-dangerous nuclear reactors.
dude, so true.
Preach.
Thorium. There's so much thorium in India.
Right.
You know how much you could start the thorium trade out of India.
Right.
I mean, that would be akin to the British discovering coal. It'd be like North Indian thorium would be like the new biggest thing, and you could by the way, if you're in India right now, figure you guys have IIT, you guys have the ISI, you guys have some of the best universities outside of the United States.
Yes.
Get together and make molten salt reactors. I shit you not. This is the only thing. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to.
Yeah, man, you can cuss on this
apologies.
podcast.
Yeah, go off. Dude.
Get it together, India. I want to see you guys do it. I'll move. If India announces molten salt reactors, I'm moving to India. I'm gonna go to Bangalore. It's happening.
Yeah, man, these are definitely great takes.
Yeah,
and they seem like obvious, but for some reason we don't do them.
Boomers.
Boomers.
Yeah. Just say it. That's just how we've done it for years. No,
the molten salt reactor, though, man, that is pretty that is a pretty crazy one.
Yeah,
we literally had one here.
For the record, for
Oak
the
Ridge.
listeners, our energy grid is like 60 years outdated. I think it's
Is it
overdue.
60?
It's overdue for.
Yeah, you were telling me the grid was all messed up after this whole Texas fiasco.
Yeah.
We still haven't updated it, apparently.
No, it's like
I don't know
we're,
much
we're
about it,
20,
though.
30 years overdue for an overhaul federally. It's insane.
Do you have any takes on that situation, Mason, about the whole Texas power?
I saw some guy on Twitter going off about how it was all about renewables. And I've been in an argument with my buddy Nicholas, who's a nuclear engineer out of Canada, about this for a while now. But for a while, I mean, the last few days, we've been going back and forth. His position is that we have too many wind farms and stuff in Texas. But if you look at the numbers, so I'm not gonna. I want to steelman his position, but like I don't know if I'm actually capable of steelmanning it.
Okay.
I think his idea is something like wind farms cost a lot. I'm going to try to steelman it, which is wind farms cost a lot. They're not active at all times, and so you need some sort of storage mechanism in order for them to work.
Yeah.
Right. That's pretty standard take. My take is that the real reason things went bad was because if you actually look at the numbers in gigawatts, is that the natural gas plants weren't winterized. And so, because they use natural gas in Canada, no problem.
Yeah.
They just needed to winterize the natural gas plants, and they just had like issues with gas becoming liquid and condensing, and that's not great. So,
I mean,
is it hard to winterize?
I don't know. That's the thing I don't know. I don't know how much it costs to retrofit a non-winterized plant into a winterized. That I can't comment on. So this is where someone who's a more expert than me could say, Mason, it costs more to retrofit than it does to build a new power plant. And then it's like, okay, then probably. Well, I think the answer, no matter what, is to build more natural gas plants or to actually build nuclear reactors, which is what I'm like. I just think that we need to build more nuclear reactors in general.
Yeah.
France can do it. Why can't we?
Yeah, nuclear is very, very good.
Safe.
But of course, that nuclear name is the big problem, right?
You got to rebrand it.
You were saying it was the boomers, and really, it's like this generational trauma, and like I think it's hard for us to imagine what it was like growing up and like every day thinking like it being on the news that, well, it could be any day now that the entire world is wiped out by nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Like the level of low grade constant stress that everyone must have been in during the Cold War is probably more than we can imagine. It'd be like really seriously worrying about a 9/11 a day, but worse.
True.
Yeah, it's like it's their nuclear is I hate to say this, but is our school shootings, like whenever you hear school shootings?
Oh god.
True.
It's like that trigger.
I think it's.
I'm saying
it's worse.
It's the trigger. It's the anxiety trigger of like hearing like the about nuclear stuff. Like, I think they have that generational trauma. Like
yeah. Where I guess if you're in school nowadays, you're high school, you're like.
You're looking over your shoulder. Yeah, you're looking over your shoulder. You're like,
you're trying to be nice to that kid in the trench coat. You're like,
no, you're really, really trying to not bully people. And not bullying people, everybody's like, let's not bully anybody, everybody. This is important.
We're not the ones.
Yeah, let's not bully anybody. Let's make a safe environment for everybody, please.
Right.
But yeah, it's I think it has to do a lot of with maybe generational stuff, but But it's up to us to really carry the mantle, I think, and like be forward thinking and kind of implement new technologies, right? Like you're saying, molten salt reactors and stuff. Yeah. And make the case, right?
But we just have to do it before the people who were there for the buildings of the first ones are gone. Like that's so important. Is that I feel like sometimes we forget that we lose knowledge if we don't constantly re-up it.
True.
So. We need to make sure that we do this before everyone who is alive for a nuclear reactor construction is dead.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Like this we can't just wait until all the boomers die to do this, because then we'll not have any of the boomers that were there to tell us like, hey, you do that'll be a huge mistake.
Right. Yeah.
That's why boomers got to gracefully bow out. Boomers don't get out.
They have to bow out and let us run things while they can still be advisors. Right. And this is something that there's the transition phase that I feel like we're just not doing these days, which is where you bow out and become an advisor before you die.
Right.
The the patriarch or matriarch of the family is not supposed to be the person who's running everything. I think it's a misunderstanding that it's like you have to be the king until you're dead or the queen until you're dead. It's like there should be this period of time. And this is actually it sounds strange, but this is actually like why menopause exists at a biological level. And I'm not gonna get you in trouble. I promise I'm gonna explain this in a way that makes sense.
No, this wouldn't be what gets us in trouble.
Okay, cool. Good. So you would say normally once you're done reproducing, right? Nature stops caring about you. Biology does not care about you once you can't have children anymore. Once you're past the point of reproduction, biology ought not to care about you anymore. Yeah. So animals that aren't very intelligent or cultural don't have females go through menopause. Why? Well, the answer is because there's no benefit to keeping you around. You're just an extra mouth to feed.
True.
You're a waste of space. But if you're from a cognitive species, then what the females can do is they can pass down cultural information across generations, which turns out to be valuable enough to keep them around. Like at a biological level, not at some like social engineering level, just at like it improves the survival rate of your group if you have females who have been around or males, but like menopause is specifically a female thing. So I'm talking about this, who can pass down information across generational time gaps.
Yeah, I think it's more dramatic in females because in males, it's I think testosterone starts dropping off linearly after 35, and I think like that's to lend, like to yield to power, I guess. Imagine if your testosterone stays high your whole life, you're never
old and you're never trying to buck up.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like a gradual. I think, or maybe it's earlier, but anyway, there's debate on the timeline, but it does gradually decrease over time. So to kind of give room and
that makes sense
to like open up society to younger people and to make way.
Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting, but I think we're running on the end of the clock here.
Cool.
Aren't we? So, Mason, we really appreciate you coming on, man.
This has been
I don't know
lovely.
if you have any final thoughts to share with the audience. Maybe plug your stuff. Got any new projects going on?
Absolutely. If you're on Clubhouse, check me out on Clubhouse. I spend probably an unhealthy amount of time on Clubhouse. In fact, I knew it was bad when people who I didn't know tweeted out, "Is it just me, or is @Mason Hargrave in every Clubhouse room?"
That's hilarious.
That's when I know it was bad. I like people who I didn't know with way more followers than me were tweeting out my name, being like, "What the heck is this guy doing?"
Yeah.
That would be us too if I had it.
All right, Mason, I just followed you.
Oh, beautiful. I'm going to follow you back.
Cool.
Awesome. And then what else do I have? Solutions with Mason Hargrave. Feels funny saying that, but my manager, I just like calling him a manager. He's my editor, but I call him my manager. It makes him feel better and me feel cooler. My manager says that I need to say the with Mason Hargrave part to build the brand. Brand it is Solutions with Mason Hargrave on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, all the places. Check it out. Interviewing scientists about the art of problem solving, a bunch of scientists here in New York City. And then anything else? Twitter @Mason Hargrave, Instagram, metaphysical_ramblings. And
nice.
that is I think that's the plug. I think that's all of the things that I have to plug. So thank you guys so much for having me on. This is honestly super fun.
Yeah.
I hope we can do it again sometimes. If you guys ever want to do this again, I'd be happy to do it. If you guys are ever in New York City, let me know. I'll make sure that you are welcomed with open arms.
Sweet.
Oh, thank you, man. And also likewise for you in Florida too. So
yeah. Well, for now, I guess.
Unless the Eigenbros have a different crossroads. We'll see, though.
We'll see.
But Mason, thank you so much, man.
Yes. Appreciate it, man.
Absolutely.
We had a lot of fun. So likewise, it's a two-way street, I think. And you're invited anytime you want to come on. So,
awesome.
Just let us know. Yeah.
Will do.
Yeah. All right, man.
Sweet. Thank you, guys.
Ta-ta.
Thanks everybody listening. Check us out on our socials, all that
Yep.
other stuff, and we'll see y'all later.
See you guys.